Well, hello there.
Hello.
Happy Sunday, friends, lovers. Welcome. It's 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir. You are here with me, and I am here with Amy Nasir.
Here I am, special guest.
My delightful co-host.
Who's always here. Who has, I'm channeling my inner kitty.
Too sweet. Too sweet. It is Sunday, September 13th, 2020.
Already.
And we are so glad you're here. This is the 257th day of the year.
I thought you were going to say it's 257th episode.
But it is only the 29th episode, number 28.
Is it?
Yes.
Oh, nice.
You know, computer people start everything on 0. Well, actually, it was more of a test episode. But yes, it is episode number 28, the 29th episode of 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir, with just 109 days remaining in the year. 103 shopping days until Christmas. I'm going to keep saying that wrong. There's 102 shopping days until Christmas, and you shouldn't be shopping on Christmas.
Well, speaking of shopping, you already mentioned Halloween, right?
Well...
Oh, no, you didn't yet.
There are 48 days, not even 2 months, 48 days left until Halloween.
So I have this beautiful, so starting at the day 39, I have this gorgeous Witches Go Flying and Black Cats Are Seen days, this is 39 days till Halloween. Yeah, I got this at Michael's. Wonderful little thing here. Very vintage looking. Very, very spooky. And
your only mistake was in only putting 4 digits in the tens column, because some people start getting ready for Halloween well before 39 days ahead of time.
I need triple digits. And at the same store, I found something that is actually something. It's going to prove to us.
Okay, if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, you might want to reload it on YouTube so you can see the video.
So I have found something that we've been looking for all this time. It's a brain in the jar.
Brain in a jar.
It's actually a candle. But it's not just a candle. It's something that has completely thrown off my understanding of metaphysics entirely.
It's impossible.
It's impossible. Basically, this is proof that there is such a thing as magic and supernatural things out in the world, right?
So it's just a candle, and it's a plain candle with plain white, petroleum wax, which, the folks at Aurum Naturals would be scandalized at using a unnatural non-beeswax candle. But it's a plain white candle, plain white wick.
We've got a flame here.
So it's real flame, not an LED flame. So you're going to light it, and it will be a fire.
Now watch this. Abracadabra.
Wait, why is it lighting up with color as well as fire? How is that possible?
It's turning green now. This is so fantastic.
But the flame can't do that.
No, it can't. It's magic.
So Halloween with the Nasirs is not a day, it's a season. And it's a long season. We have the brain in a jar, and it changes colors.
So we thought to ourselves, if we were ever brain in jars, we would certainly want to change colors.
Now, we wouldn't want you to think that the phrase brain in a jar resonates with us, because there are some folks who put the mind so far above the body in priorities that they essentially are brains in a jar. We would not want you to think we were making fun of that kind of person.
So somebody who eschews the physical and is only concerned with the intellectual.
Fortunately, at least in objectivism, you don't really get that anymore. But we've seen enough of it that it's a very... Anyway.
You are an integration of mind and body, not just a brain in the jar.
That's right.
So happy Halloween.
That's right. That's why I have a magnet for my refrigerator that quotes Ayn Rand as, "Man is an integrated entity of mind and body." And then the quote ends there, but my button says, "Eat rationally." And I try to do that.
Yes, celebrate
I also
Halloween
drink rationally.
Yeah.
Today I have my Dad Rocks mug.
Nice.
So thank you, Diana.
Oh, and I have a Halloween mug from the Henry Ford.
Of course, everything Amy is Halloween.
Look at how spooky that is. Oof. It has spooky water in it.
48 days until Halloween. September 13th, 2020. And on this date, the most notable historical event I could find on this date was Oprah Winfrey gave away 276 Pontiac G6 sedans on her show in 2004.
I wonder if any of them are still running today. Somebody must look into that.
You get a car. And you get a car. And you get a car.
And you get a brain in the jar.
I don't know that I've ever seen that episode, but it's a meme.
I saw it.
It's ubiquitous, whatever that means.
It's
Unfortunately, given federal and state tax laws, each one of the recipients of that automobile ended up having to pay about $6,000 in taxes and fees.
Whoops. Whoops, Oprah. Oh, so John says, what is a dad rock?
Dad rock, that's right. Yes, the mug says Dad rocks.
There's an S at the end of rock.
Yes, if you've seen Amy and I rocking out on YouTube.
Right. You can actually find those videos. Go to YouTube, go to his page, maybe go to my page. I don't know. Look up...
Ron Toole and the Capitalists.
Yes.
Yeah, Ron Toole may be out there listening right now. And,
mortified
and we thank him for being
a
supporter of the show.
Yes.
Someday I'll tell the story about how Ron Toole dragged me out of rock and roll retirement and transformed me from a bass player into a guitar player, and transformed Amy from a nascent bass player to a active and amazing bass player.
Thank you very much. Yes.
But we're not going to tell that story today, but on this date also, Peter Cetera of Chicago turned 75 years old. Happy birthday, Peter. So go listen to some early Chicago records. The albums numbered 1 through 8. After that, they became a fantastic pop rock band, but the real good stuff was when they were all jazzy. When they were a classic 70s horn band. And also today is National Grandparents' Day. Mm-hmm. So if you have living grandparents, give them a phone call. Or turn your head and say hi if they live with you. But yes, check in with your grandparents. Those of us who are a little too old to have living grandparents envy you. So take advantage of that.
Yes. And Jennifer joins us. Hello, Jennifer.
Oh, yes.
Hello, Jennifer.
The squeezy Halloween characters came from Jennifer, so we thank Jennifer for that.
Well, look, it's
super awesome. We talked before about how if you want to get in on this year's Halloween exchange, because Lord knows whether trick-or-treaters are going to be able to go around or whether we'll be able to attend any Halloween parties. If you want to get in on this year's Halloween exchange, get on Facebook, send Amy a message or post something. Let her find you, let her identify you, let her get you on her list.
Let me love you with my Halloween love.
And it's Halloween, so I don't think it matters whether you're naughty or nice.
That's right.
Because if you're naughty, people will just assume it's a Halloween thing. So it's all good, man.
It's all good.
So what we're listening to this week. The podcast of the week is The School of Greatness with Lewis Howes.
That sounds like they're still trying to learn about greatness, but it's
well,
the
they
School of
just
Greatness.
hit 1,000 episodes.
Okay.
So he knows something about greatness at this point. Lewis Howes, Howes, if you don't already know the show, was an all-star athlete who then had a sports injury that knocked him out of pro sports.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And then he had to rebuild his life. He now calls himself a lifestyle entrepreneur.
Oh.
So, life coaching and
Yeah.
a little bit of philosophy, a little bit of sociology, a little bit of just self-improvement. It's interesting that he chose a phrase that kind of brings all of those different things that are all sort of related anyway together. In any event, The School of Greatness with Lewis Howes, worth a listen. And this week in particular, because I was putting together notes for this week's episode of this podcast. Believe it or not, I actually prepare for these things, even though mostly we just talk about Halloween. And originally, my note paper said intentionality. Intentionality. So I was going to talk about intention, and I am going to talk about intentionality. And then I had to ask myself, well, how long is now? Because the moment in which you make a decision, the moment in which you choose, the moment in which you assert your intentions is now, but how long is now? How long do you have to make a decision before it's over? We've talked about the 5-second rule, but how long is now is actually a deep philosophical question that I won't be answering on the show.
And it comes right after the question, how
soon is now? No. So,
Something like that.
so putting together notes for a show on intentionality,
Yeah.
I came across one of the podcasts I listen to now and then, The School of Greatness with Lewis Howes.
Yes.
And he had just hit his 1,000th episode. And that's always cool because you get a really good show when somebody hits a landmark like that. When we hit our 100th episode, for example,
Woo!
then we'll do a super special. We'll do an episode where we do nothing but talk about rabbits for 5 minutes.
Yes, please.
However long 5 minutes turns out to be. But on the School of Greatness, episode 1003, he had on a guy, and it's funny that I say a guy, some of you will be like, I know who that is. I didn't know who that was. A guy named Shetty.
Okay.
Shetty. And the episode was called Mindset Habits for Happiness and Thinking Like a Monk. Thinking like a monk does not sound fun.
No.
Or at least living like a monk doesn't sound like fun.
No.
But I listened to this episode, and surprisingly enough, interestingly enough, this person who it turns out also has a podcast, Shetty, said a lot of the things that I would have wanted to say.
Yeah, he was saying all sorts of things that Robert would say.
And a lot of really wacky things I would never say, but the good stuff is really good. So the podcast of the week and what you should listen to is School of Greatness, Lewis Howes, episode 1003, Shetty. And it was such a good episode that I wrote down some things to discuss with you,
yes,
Amy, and with you, friends and lovers,
so while you're
this week.
So while you're listening to this live, you can also go over to YouTube and listen to us live as well. But then after that, you can listen to this podcast, and then you can come back to our show and listen again on YouTube.
It'll be awesome.
It'll be awesome.
Now, how do you find that episode that I'm talking about?
Oh, it's going to be in the show notes.
It's going to be in the show notes right after the episode, so don't leave. Wait until we're done. Within 5 minutes after the end of the show, it'll be posted in the show notes.
Yeah, Mary Arlene, hey Mary Arlene, she says, are monks happy?
Are monks happy? Well,
I suppose if you're a temporary monk,
they're happy of a kind. They're monk happy.
What's his name again? Shetty? Jay Shetty.
So here's the thing.
Yeah, I don't think he's a full-time monk.
So if you saw my Facebook wall earlier this week, I posted the topic, Getting a Grip. Mindfulness, intentionality, focus, choice, habits, routines. And then I listened to this podcast with this weird Jay Shetty guy. Listen to this.
When I hear the word mindfulness, to me what it really means is intentionality. What I mean by that is, are you crafting, designing, and intentionally creating your life? Or are you just coasting in the passenger seat of your life, which is just dragging you and driving you wherever it's taking you? And so it's the difference between being the driver or being in the passenger seat.
Okay, now, that episode actually came out before I had written my notes, even though I hadn't heard it yet. But I swear, just like we found with Kevin Hart, in his book, The Decision, or his audiobook, The Decision, he stole my lines. He stole them even before I thought of them, which is obviously a time travel trick. I don't know how he did that.
Well, he got it because, supernaturalism exists, as we can see by this candle.
Oh, that's true. You have the color-changing brain in a jar. So obviously the primacy of existence is on shaky ground. How much did I love that he said, when I think of mindfulness, I think of intentionality. How much did I love that? I love that all the way, however much it is possible to love that. Because in the flow from focus to choice, all the way up to habits and routines and living not just the examined life, but the directed life.
The directed life.
Intentionality is the pivot point. It's what I mean by mindfulness.
Yeah.
So when I would talk about mindfulness, and people occasionally would say, especially online, well, that's kind of woo, that's kind of crazy. People who talk about mindfulness, they're not rational. They're not based on reason. They're not based on respect for reality. So no. What they mean by mindfulness is simply being present. Oh, that still sounds kind of woo. Well, no, being present in the sense of being intentional in your focus.
Do they mean using your brain?
Yes, but not the color-changing brain in a jar. Yes, so I absolutely love that. Another interesting point that was brought up in the discussion in the podcast then, as you're directing your intention, Lewis Howes asked him an interesting question. He said, well, people have a hard time with this concept of free will.
Uh-huh. Like Sam Harris?
Because we all go through our stuff. You know, you go through your life, you go through your nature and your nurture.
Right.
And where does free will come in? And it was interesting because this guy, Jay Shetty, said, well, he regards free will as a dynamic dance between my situation and what I will do in this situation. And I thought that was interesting, a dynamic dance. That's like a metaphor, but it's a useful metaphor because we've talked about you have the option to focus or not. And once you focus or not, depending on what inputs you're receiving, will give you the option of what to focus on. In other words, choice. And once you make a choice, then you can decide what action to take. In other words, whether to keep focusing, keep choosing, and then put that into action. What's interesting about that to me is the feedback mechanism. As soon as you make a choice, in other words, as soon as something happens and you decide what to do about it, right away you're now facing what you chose and what to do about that. And then what happens because of it and what to do about that. It is a back and forth, or as Jay Shetty likes to say, it's a dynamic dance.
So you could also say something like you're basically changing your focus between external stimuli and what's going on in your mind and what your thoughts are, and organizing the information that's coming through. And
yes,
yeah.
Your own internal content is part of that decision to continue to engage and where to engage, in what direction to engage.
Yep.
But I actually had a new insight thinking about that.
Ooh, what's this? Everybody.
Because, well, you've heard me discuss choice and free will in terms of sure, things happen, and sure, you are what you are, and you've been through what you've been through, but then you get to decide what to do about it.
Yes.
But this constant feedback, or his dynamic dance, makes clear that it doesn't end there.
Right.
Well, not only does it not end there, not only do you then decide in the next moment what to do about what came back at you as a result of that, and everything else, because of everything else, because of this interplay, and because the complexity is endless, you don't just decide what to do or whether to continue to focus. And that idea of deciding what to do about what happens to you, I now see that that's disempowering.
Okay.
That can kind of knock you down, where you're deciding, oh, do I face this day or do I have a lazy day? So you can kind of see the challenges I've been facing lately, and one of the reasons I'm thinking about intentionality and how long is now. And but what I realized is you don't just decide, okay, am I going to focus? What am I going to do about what life is throwing at me? In any given moment, you choose what to do with what's happening in response to it. And you choose what to do, but you also respond to your situation. So you don't just choose, but you also embrace your situation. If your psychology and your metaphysics are healthy, you accept your situation. You accept the facts of reality. And you choose whether to embrace it or deny it. And you choose whether to capitalize on it.
And you choose how you respond to it.
You choose the experience you will have because of it.
Yes.
And you choose whether to appreciate it.
Yeah.
And to greet it with gratitude, this next moment of your irreplaceable life.
It reminds me of, if you don't mind me digressing just slightly, there was a lovely gentleman named Jerry Davis who was a little older than 20, you might say. He was a presenter at Greenfield Village of the Henry Ford, and he passed away recently. And he was a real centerpiece of the entire place. And he was so well loved and so beloved and everything like that. And there's stories that are just coming out about his life and how, even through difficult times or times that are very distracting and or something went wrong, he was the kind of person who would be able to not just pick himself back up, but make a joke about it. And so I've always admired people who were like that. Who
ability to decide what their reaction would be and not just react.
Exactly. They brought some style and some humor and some joy to the situation where otherwise it would just be entirely miserable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a new insight for me. Not just do I respond positively or negatively to this, but do I respond gratefully?
Yes.
Do I respond creatively?
Yes.
Do I respond humorously? There's so many options that, and I think you sort of knew this implicitly, but to get that point conceptually and to get it down on paper, now I feel like I've got power.
Yes.
Now I feel more power than I had, earlier this week.
So basically you're saying that it didn't feel very empowering when you were ignoring all the other aspects that you would be able to add to your choice?
Well, varies the tricky word there. It was empowering.
Yeah.
It was very empowering to always remember that I am at the cause of my actions, not at the effect of the things that happen to me.
Yes.
This is an additional insight that is even more empowering. So, yes, I think I had a good perspective. Now I think I have a mighty perspective.
Yes. A colorful one.
And
one,
a colorful
one that has 3 dimensions
a
to
rich perspective.
Right.
Again, probably nothing that none of us knew before. Did I get the double negative right there? Probably something that all of us knew before, but I don't know if we know it explicitly. Or maybe we just don't think about it enough explicitly. But now that I've been talking about it for too long, you've definitely thought about it enough and explicitly.
Yes.
So I hope you appreciate that. What I wanted to do was go through real quick the progression that I laid out online. Because I started with mindfulness, and then I went to the Oxford dictionaries.
Yeah.
The Oxford dictionaries are great because they're free, and I don't have a copy of the Oxford English dictionary, but Oxford University has published the free version of their dictionaries. And their definition of mindfulness is, and some of these have more than one, I'm picking out the ones that are useful for our conversation. Mindfulness, the quality or state of being conscious or aware of something. Now that's mindfulness when people talk about meditation, and it's the one a lot of people shrug off as, well, yeah, but that's not very useful. Number 2, a mental state achieved by focusing one's awareness on the present moment while calmly acknowledging and accepting one's feelings, thoughts, and bodily sensations, used as a therapeutic technique. Now that's power. That's value. That's taking mindfulness, that ability to
Can you
take in the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Repeat that. So a mental state achieved by focusing one's awareness on the present moment while calmly acknowledging and accepting one's feelings, thoughts, and bodily sensations, used as a therapeutic technique.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I mean when I say check in with yourself. That's kind of what I mean.
Yes.
Yep.
So that kind of gets us where we're headed. The definition of intentionality for the folks at Oxford, the fact of being deliberative, or excuse me, I got to start from the beginning because this is important. The fact of being deliberate or purposive.
Deliberate, purposive.
That's right.
Right.
The quality of mental states that consist in their being directed toward some object or state of affairs. And that's taking us toward the philosophical concept of focus, which the Oxford dictionaries define as adapt to the prevailing level of light and become able to see clearly, whether of a person or of the eyes. So they're using a visual metaphor, but they make the point it extends beyond that.
Yep.
Like we do in philosophy. And then definition number 2 of focus, pay particular attention to. And Bonnie out there right now is thinking, well, not to, just pay particular attention, because she understands focus comes before choice. But choice comes next in our progression here, and Oxford Dictionaries define choice as an act of selecting or making a decision when faced with two or more possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
Those are all tightly related, tightly corresponding, but at least for me, following that progression from mindfulness to being aware and being there, intentionality, actively choosing to apply intention to what your mindfulness brings up.
Yep.
Focus, that step of turning it on, of coming out of drift. Choice, where to direct that focus. That to me is a helpful progression. And then the next two concepts that I had outlined, which is, what do you do with this? And this is where the power comes from, and we'll talk more about this later today and in future episodes. Habit and routine.
Yeah.
Once you've got control, not just of your focus, but of the direction of your focus, once you have intention, now you can start leveraging that. And how do you leverage it? How do you make a machine out of intention? Habits and routines. So habit is defined as a settled or regular tendency or practice, especially one that is hard to give up. Well, we don't care about the hard to give up part because the habits we're talking about are empowering habits. A settled or regular tendency or practice. You develop a practice, you get a result far beyond what your free will, your psychic energy, your choice to focus can get you.
Mm-hmm.
And then routine, a sequence of actions regularly followed, a fixed program, and then as an adjective, performed as part of a regular procedure rather than for a special reason. You create a routine, you develop a habit, now you've leveraged your intention to produce results in the real world.
Yes.
So I found listening to that Lewis Howes episode very clarifying once I had already written these notes. I'm like, oh, maybe I don't need to do this episode. But they take it in kind of a weird direction, so you absolutely need to listen to Amy and me. And listen to Lewis and Jay if you want.
And also judge for yourself because you are an autonomous thinking human being. But
if they think for themselves, they won't need us.
So we've got a definition here that talks about the mindfulness here. John, he has a question.
Yes.
So let me just let's reread a mental state achieved by focusing one's awareness on the present moment while calmly acknowledging and accepting one's feelings, thoughts, and bodily sensations, used as a therapeutic technique. And his question is, that's the Wu definition, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the Wu definition is actually, now I got to go back here. What was I talking about with the Wu definition? Oh, actually, I didn't type it out. No, some of the definitions, and if you go to Oxford Dictionaries online, you'll find them. Some of the definitions were very woo. Mm-hmm. No, I didn't find this to be very woo at all. A mental state achieved by focusing one's awareness on the present moment, while calmly acknowledging and accepting what. Now, the word accepting can be seen as woo, unless what you're doing is accepting the fact, accepting the reality. Mm-hmm. Accepting that it's true, as opposed to evading it, or not taking that information in, the sort of pre-evasion that you get of drift. No, I think that's very valuable. Even though, yes, some people might say you should accept it, in the sense of accepting it morally, or accepting it passively, accepting evil. That I don't think that's what we're talking about.
No, it's just the facts of your of what you're doing, how you're feeling, who you are, what's the state of your conscious awareness, all of that.
Yeah, passive acceptance and the decision that it's okay and I don't have to do anything about it.
Yeah,
that is call it a failure mode out there. But nobody who listens to this podcast would make that kind of mistake.
True. Very true. Yeah, and
but it's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, as far as like the therapeutic technique,
well, I mean, depends on how you define that. What do you mean by therapeutic technique?
Right. I mean, you could
my
talk
therapy
about
is all internal.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of something you do as a practice, I mean, in conjunction with some other, habits that you have for your own mental health, like counseling and all that stuff. So maybe they're just just kind of giving a little nod to psychology in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that goes back to kind of the insight that I had of we choose our reactions to things without making them broad enough, without applying enough creativity to what our reactions could be.
Right. Okay, so I just want to I have a question.
Yes.
I made some notes on this particular School of Greatness podcast. And so we were talking about, figuring out, like, how do I want to react to whatever is happening around me? And you can apply all sorts of dimensions, sorts of aspects and ways to go about things, including the style that you want to present in reacting to it. You could use humor in a difficult situation, things like that. But Shetty, right?
Shetty.
Yeah, he was talking about when he felt that he was complaining to himself, and he has a habit of complaining, and if he's tired or exhausted, he'll tell himself and say out loud, even around other people, I am so tired, I am so exhausted, and he'll kind of look and seek commiseration with other people or some sort of validation. And so instead of, he finds that when he does that, it kind of reinforces his exhaustion.
Yes. When I heard that, my reaction was, you never say, I am tired, without either explicitly or at least internally saying, I'm not tired, I am a person who is tired.
Well, that is certainly one point, but he actually, because he did talk about that in terms of I am versus I am experiencing this.
Or do you mean in the sense of acknowledging and accepting?
Not even that. My point is, so in terms of adding dimensions to this to kind of solve the problem or make this into a better habit or kind of replace a bad habit with a new habit, he decided to attach the concept of taking action to that particular issue. So it's not just, being positive, power of positive thinking, saying to himself, no, I am not tired, I am super pumped. And then that may actually last for half an hour.
Yeah.
But it's short term, it's not long term, and it's not connecting to an action or a habit. So he'll say instead, when he feels that way and he wants to talk about it, he'll promise himself to resolve the issue for the day. He'll go to bed early, and he'll say, I'm going to go to bed early.
Yeah, so it was very reality focused,
Yes.
this discussion about that.
So I really appreciated that, connecting to a particular specific small action. And he did also talk about the idea of changing your habits and changing your practices, and think about small steps but big priorities. So you can take these small steps every day, and you have to be consistent, and they're small steps, but you have to basically say to yourself, they're small steps, but they are big priorities. I need to get them done. And
Yes.
They need to be consistent. They need to be every day. And so I found that helpful.
Yeah, it took me back to our discussion of grit,
Yes.
which, we went with the definition, grit equals passion plus perseverance.
Yes.
And yeah, they made the point on the show that you don't achieve success by creating a really, really big goal and then wanting to achieve it all right away.
Right.
You achieve a big goal in small steps, in small stages,
Yes.
in bite-sized pieces. And that was very valuable. It was interesting too because they discussed routines and habits. For example, they talked about nighttime routines.
Yes.
And it took me back to our discussions about curating your environment. So, for example, on their podcast, they asked the question, well, what's the first thing you see or hear when you wake up in the morning? And,
I like this.
for most people, it was an alarm. And for most people, their first experiences were looking at their phone. Which, again, for most people is not an empowering experience.
No.
If they're looking at their
It's
social
very,
media or they're
yeah.
looking at the news of the day.
It's very reactive.
It's very reactive.
And it makes you feel, certainly makes me feel like I'm just being guided by something else. I'm not actually thinking about myself, my own experiences. I'm just sort of falling into something that is reactive.
Yeah, and I took 2 lessons for that. The one is not just to curate your experience so that it's enjoyable and empowering, but also to create a flow state of taking action, of being in control. Mm-hmm. And looking at your news and looking at your social media often is passive, but also makes you feel like you have very little control
Yes.
over the state of affairs, the state of your world, the state of the news of the day. So that might not be where you want to spend your first 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes. And so the question is, well, what if you looked at something inspiring instead? And my reaction to that was, what if you did something empowering instead? Mm-hmm. What if you did something that kicked off the flow of empowering actions?
Yes.
If you felt in control because you were in control, because you had chosen that in the first 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes of my morning, here are things I'm going to do. And then you do them.
Right.
What does the rest of your day look like if you started that way?
Right. And this reminds me, yesterday I forgot my phone at home.
No.
And we spent about a half an hour in the Starbucks drive-thru because I wanted one of those nice pumpkin spice cold brew or foam things or whatever they're called. They're so delicious. And so we're sitting there talking, and Robert has his tablet in front of him and everything like that, but I don't have a phone. So I found myself thinking things that I haven't actually thought about in quite a long time, and I just felt meditative, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, she was looking out the window at reality.
I came up with questions. I'm like, have you ever noticed this, that, and the other thing? And Robert and I had a really nice,
trees do this thing, and
deep conversation.
The sky is this, and automobiles are like that, and
but we had a very connecting conversation.
It's a very interesting world, even if you're not staring at your phone.
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, the whole idea of and so I told him. I said, I would love to go on vacation and leave my phone behind. I would just tell everybody if there's an emergency, call Robert. And that would be really lovely. It might drive me a little bit nutty, but after a while I would get used to it, and I would feel like I'm, living in the 80s or the 90s again. That it would be so lovely to do that, and so refreshing and so peaceful. So anyway, that was my thought on that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I cannot overemphasize, and in fact, I'll give you a homework assignment on that, the importance of curating your experiences. Mm-hmm. I've talked about taking control of your social networking, for example.
Yeah.
And curating your social network feed.
Yes.
Remove people and friends and groups and people you're following who are not empowering,
right.
who are giving you useless information. Consider the news that you read 2 weeks ago, and does any of it matter 2 weeks later, today? If it matters, great, you're following the right stories. If you can't even remember who James Damore was, then how important was that, other than being a sign of the collapse of Western civilization?
Wait, who's James Damore?
That was the guy who wrote the, I'm putting up air quote marks for you folks on Apple Podcasts. That was the guy who wrote the Google memo.
Oh, right. Okay, right. Mm-hmm.
And although that was a telling indication of things that are happening, to be staring at stories like that, which tell you almost nothing new,
right,
and which give you no power to achieve or accomplish anything, unless you're in an intellectual field and you're in a position to write an article, write a letter, make some change. In any event, the point is, this is your reminder to curate your experiences. And I will include in that curating your spaces.
Yes, include a squishy skeleton man.
Include a squishy Halloween skeleton.
Yes.
But seriously, focus on music that empowers you. I know people who listen to very angry and negative music, and they say, well, it's great when I go to the gym. if anyone's going to the gym these days. Our gym just reopened, but we haven't been back yet.
Or not, I don't think we're going to go.
Amy wants to cancel our membership because we can do better here with bicycles and free weights and Amy's couch to standing workouts, which y'all should be part of.
Yes. Thank you.
Curate your experiences. Surround yourself with things that empower you. Do Marie Kondo and figure out what doesn't spark joy in your life. And you don't need to do her routine. Just get rid of the crap that's making you miserable. All of the, oh, I should do something about that, or oh, I should get rid of that someday, or oh, I wanted a better one of those. And take action on that. But also music. If music is down and negative and the only thing it's good for is getting you angry enough to go work out, consider adding something more benevolent to your playlists. And first and foremost, or last and foremost, what kind of art are you surrounding yourself by? What does your space look like? You know, Yaron Brook has pointed out that you don't need $1 million budget to go out and buy art originals. You can get great posters and pictures and photographs. But if you've got a budget, you can go to cordair.com.
Yes.
Let Quent and Linda Cordair fill your life with beauty. Point is, curate your experiences. Make sure you're choosing what your world looks like. You don't have to evade the bad news of the day. To keep in touch with it and not let that be the world you live in, because I got news, the headlines of the day are the smallest part of the world you live in.
Yes.
The real world you live in is if you walk down your street and say hi to somebody and he doesn't shoot you. You walk into a Starbucks. He won't shoot you.
Oh,
He'll usually say hi back. No, he might look at you a little strange. What are you saying hi to me for? No, seriously, you go talk to strangers, and whether you're in the city or rural, I don't care where you are.
Yep.
90% of the people you meet or more will say hi back. And they will be happy that somebody said hi to them.
Yes.
Go into Starbucks or go into McDonald's or go into your favorite restaurant. Order a drink or food. And the neat thing is, after you do that and you give them some money, they give you your drink and food.
I know, I love
They
it.
They don't poison you. They don't throw you out of the restaurant. They smile at you and give you things.
Right. They don't spit in your Big Mac. It's just perfect.
I could go on, but listen. Listen to our episode on benevolence, and you'll know what I'm talking about.
I just want to give a shout out to, not shout out, but just a little personal anecdote. When I go into stores now and I've got the mask on, everything like that, I find myself looking into people's eyes. I'm looking into your eyes, and it's just
all you can look at.
Really fascinating and very cool. And I know a lot of people grumble, but I am just embracing what I can do and the positive things that I can do about them. And on top of that, before I leave and they say, here you are, you're all set, have a great day, I look at them in the eyes and I say, thank you so much for helping me. You have a great day too. And it's just, and it comes out in my voice, my smile comes out in my voice, it comes out in my eyes, and I just, it's just lovely.
It is. It is that. I think I told, maybe I haven't, one of my tricks for overcoming shyness, as you can tell I'm an extremely shy person, is make sure that if you meet somebody, you spend some time with somebody, that you can answer the question afterwards, what color were their eyes?
That's a great question.
I've got a post on Facebook talking about my darling wife's blue eyes and my darling daughter's green eyes.
Yes.
And as is my usual style, I talked about that before I finally explained. You want to know what color people's eyes are, because if you're the kind of person who looks at people but doesn't really see them, or if you're like me and you're really shy and you tend to avoid looking people directly in the eye, you want to overcome that.
Yeah.
So I love your story because you're right. People have a mask on. That's a drag. But at least now you're looking right in people's eyes because there's nothing else to look at. You can't watch their mouth while they're talking or any of that.
Right.
So, yeah, I like that story.
Yes.
So I could go on, and I will, but
So we've got
Not
some
today.
lovely comments here. We have Brian, who I think is a new viewer. I'm really enjoying this topic about living.
Brian's an artist.
Oh, well, that's so wonderful. Yes, I'm really enjoying this topic about living with intention. And,
Good.
Brian, we'll keep talking about it.
Oh my gosh.
All of our topics kind of relate to each other. They're sprung out of the idea of values.
Yeah, they do. If you look at the past episodes on choice and on values,
Yes.
you'll get more of that.
Right.
And it is building up to something even bigger than what we've done today. Substantially bigger than what we've done today, considering some of the rambling. But I'm going to jump right to homework.
Okay.
Because 5 minutes are almost up.
Yes.
Real quick, your Post-it note for the day, which is on my sheet of paper, but also on my pad here. That idea of you don't just face things that happen. That's not, the rational reaction is to face what comes at you. And that's true, but then I realized you don't just choose to choose, you choose to experience, or you choose to respond. So I wrote it on a Post-it note. Choose one. Experience, respond, choose, embrace, capitalize, appreciate. And the funny thing is, if you got that far through it, you realize, oh, that's not one, that's not an either or.
Yeah.
You can choose and embrace and respond and experience and capitalize and appreciate and show gratitude and show love, and I could go on and on and on. If you find yourself thinking, as I often have, oh, my choices are either to evade or to face this thing life is throwing at me.
Oh, have to's.
And oh my gosh, when I think about it that way, it's
Horrible. How
it
miserable.
just beats you up. And even if you trudge your way through it, you're trudging your way through it.
Yeah.
And I've got to remind myself that I'm more creative than that. And you are more creative than that.
Yes, and that list is going to be in the show notes.
That list will be in the show notes. It's not, but it will be, because Amy just reminded me to type it in there.
Yes.
But your homework for the week then, beginnings and endings. Curate your intro and your outro. In a piece of music, sometimes the best part of the music is the opening
Yeah.
and the closing. And your day can and should be like that. So what I want you to do, if you're up for this, and I know you are, decide in advance on paper and for a finite period, say 3 days or a week. You figure out what works for you. But I always say, write it down. If you don't write it down, it doesn't count. Got to be on paper. Decide what your first 20 minutes of your day will look and sound like.
That's actually pretty easy. 20 minutes is pretty easy.
Well, you might already know that. Maybe it already looks like, oh yeah, my alarm goes off, I go through one snooze, so I take 9 minutes for that. Then I get up and I turn on the coffee pot machine, a Keurig, whatever you're using. I make myself an espresso and I sit at my desk and read the news. Whatever it is. Decide and make it explicit, put it on paper, decide in advance, but curate it.
Yes.
Decide, in other words, design that first 20 minutes.
Oh, design the first 20 minutes. I'm going to start by coming up with a song that I can wake up to and
Good.
put that into my alarm on my beautiful iPhone.
Yes, replace whatever your current alarm is with something empowering. Or change it to a light that's on a timer, or whatever would be better for you. And then decide what the last 20 minutes of your day will look like and sound like. Will the last 20 minutes be when you dragged yourself to the bathroom and brushed your teeth after your TV shows finally ran out and then dragged yourself to bed? That's not the worst way you can end a day, but what I want you to do for the next 3 to 7 days is curate it, design it, decide explicitly, and don't just let it happen. I like comfort zones. I like you to be comfortable. I like people to just do what feels good, but we can do better than that.
Yes.
So, for the next 3 to 7 days, curate your intro and outro. Curate your beginning and ending. Design the first 20 minutes of your day and the last 20 minutes of your day. And if you do that, share it with us.
Yes, that's some good thinking there, Robert. Sorry, I just had to put the candle back in.
So people who are listening to the audio are like, what'd she do? What'd she do? She just held up the brain in a jar. The color-changing candle with the brain on the glass, the design there. We'll have to put a photograph of that up on,
Yes, we
on
will.
the show notes as well. If you will curate your experience for just a few days, you just may be surprised at the effect this has on your focus, on your energy, on your self-confidence, and on your ability to get a grip anytime you need to, because what happens in those first 20 minutes carries on throughout your day, and what happens in those last 20 minutes, this will sound woo, but what happens in those last 20 minutes programs your next day. Do them both, and the power is enormous. And that's what I want for you. So we will be talking more about intentionality.
Yes.
We will be doing a better job of integrating choice and free will and intention and habits and routines. And stealing a line from Kenneth Branagh in one of our favorite films, Dead Again.
Dead Again.
Appropriate for Halloween coming up. This is all far from over. So we will be having this conversation more and more, and we want you to have this conversation with us. So in the meantime, show notes will be posted right after the show. You can find this show and all of our past episodes, 28 other episodes with even better stuff than this one had, at youtube.com/Robert Nasir and facebook.com/Robert Nasir.
Which you can, at YouTube, just go over to YouTube right now. Please go ahead and give us a like.
Give us a like.
Subscribe
yeah, we need the like.
if you haven't subscribed, subscribe. Thank you so much.
We're like rock stars on Facebook, and on YouTube we get no views. It's crazy. By the end of this evening, we will have over 100 people who have watched the show on Facebook, and there will be, 15 on YouTube.
Yeah.
So by all means, if you want to help the show, one thing you can do is get our YouTube counts up, like the show, share the show from YouTube. Links will be in the show notes for sharing the show. And if you want to help the show even more than that, we are up at patreon.com/Robert Nasir. We have patrons there who are helping me with my Keurig coffee budget. I cannot thank them enough. You guys know who you are. You have my heart. Thank you so much. If you're not a Patreon user, send me a Facebook message if you need a PayPal address or a mailing address. We just received a generous contribution in the mail. So thank you so much for that. Thank you for listening. Thank you for joining us. Your comments totally make it all worth it. This is the funnest part, is checking in with what everybody is saying. Knowing that folks are on this same, I won't say journey, that's too big, but this same adventure.
Yes.
As we are, means the world to us, and especially this year. Without having in-person meetings of our group, our philosophy group, Great Lakes Objectivists, it is so good to have these experiences, to be able to reach out, to be able to talk to you, to be able to get your comments back. Thank you so much. You are the best, and as always, we wish you success. We wish you happiness. We wish you a firm grip on your inner steering wheel. And we wish you love.